place where life has become intolerably dangerous. That's been a traditional way of understanding why someone would apply for asylum. And over the past 8 years, it's felt like many coming to the United States seeking asylum are coming because their economic circumstances in their home countries are intolerable. And the Trump people are saying that the current system has encouraged too many people to invoke asylum. And as a result, the entire system has become indefensible.
Yeah, exactly. In the order itself, it details how our border system is not equipped to process people, to analyze their backgrounds, any potential criminal history that they have, and our current system just does not work. And to be fair, there is some bipartisan understanding of that. I mean, Democrats have, by and large come to that conclusion as well. Also, it's important to realize that, and to note here that in federal law, there is a provision that says that no matter the way somebody enters the United States, they are able to claim asylum.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that advocates, the ACLU, and others will point to when they inevitably sue the Trump administration. They'll say, this isn't the law. It's worth trying to shut down our southern border, to stop this really high flow of people entering the country, what he terms as an invasion, millions of people coming into the country in recent years. And he's looking with his other executive orders for a way to close the door on other pathways for immigrants who are seeking refuge in this country, closing those doors one by one.
We'll be right back.
More at nytimes.com/The Daily. Distribution of The Daily is made possible by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
You're listening to The Daily on 89.7 NPR News. I'm Debbie Holmes. Mostly cloudy tonight with some scattered flurries, low around 10. Support comes from Columbus Academy, an independent coeducational college prep school for age 3 through grade 12, which empowers students to ignite curiosity, develop an appetite for learning, and the confidence to take the world head-on. More at columbusacademy.org/tour.
On the next Fresh Air, Pamela Anderson. She became a pop culture phenomenon in the late 80s, in part because of her role on the series Baywatch. But there's much more to her than that. She received Golden Globe and Screen Actors Guild Award nominations for her role in the new film The Last Showgirl. A documentary about her was nominated for an Emmy. Join us.
This evening at 7 on 89.7 NPR News.
At the heart of President Trump's flurry of executive orders was a systematic dismantling of the country's current approach to immigration. I spoke with my colleague, Hamid Ali-Aziz, about what the orders do and the message that they send. Hamid, we've been talking about asylum and President Trump's plans to shut that down in multiple ways. How else is he using these early executive orders to stop foreigners from trying to enter the United States?
Yeah, President Trump has directed the DHS secretary to immediately shut down a Biden-era program that allowed immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and Nicaragua to fly into the country through something called humanitarian parole. President Biden saw this as a way to allow people a different way to enter the country and to avoid taking this long journey through Mexico, entering the country illegally, putting their lives in the hands of smugglers.
So kind of like the app. Basically, the thinking was, if they're going to come anyway, let's create a more legal-ish path for them.
Exactly, and I think that there's almost a political element involved with this program, which is to say to the American public, don't worry. When this person enters the United States, they have a financial sponsor that's going to take care of them. They won't be living off the state. This is a program that makes sense, and they saw it as a solution that was working.
How many people used it?
More than 500,000 in 2 years use this program.
Which is a lot of people. So in Biden's mind, this recognizes a problem at the border, finds a way to deal with it. I'm going to guess that to Trump, 500,000 people coming from those countries is perhaps 500,000 too many.
They saw this as a way for the government to allow people who had no other route to the United States to fly into the country and to remain as long as they wanted. And so I think this speaks to a lack of communication from the Biden administration, from President Biden, explaining his approach. He was never able to do that in a really succinct way, and other people filled that vacuum. Conservative figures were saying that the U.S. government was sponsoring people to fly into the United States, to come into your cities, and this just was not true.
Got it.
And so far we've talked about Biden-era programs that President Trump has shut down, but he also moved to close off other programs that preceded President Biden and that were supported on a bipartisan basis.
What's an example of an executive order that did that?
President Trump decided to suspend our refugee admissions program. As of next Monday, January 27th, the program will be shut down, and in the next 90 days, the Department of Homeland Security will have to deliver a report to President Trump in which they say whether or not it's necessary for President Trump to bring back the refugee program and whether that's in the national interest of the United States.
Can you just distinguish, for those of us who maybe pretend we know but really don't, the distinction between someone seeking asylum and a refugee?
A refugee is applying for entry into the United States from abroad. They are oftentimes in a third country, in a refugee camp. They've gone to the United Nations and they've said, I'm a refugee. That kickstarts a process that can take upwards of 2 years, where they're vetted by the United States. They go through all kinds of health and security checks, and they're waiting for a long time to enter the country. But if they do, at that point, they get a pathway to U.S. citizenship. It's legal immigration to the United States. Under the Biden administration, it took them 4 years to rebuild the refugee system that President Trump dismantled his first time in office. By the end of the Biden administration last year, they had allowed around 100,000 refugees. This is the highest total in 30 years.
Wow.
And this isn't something that's, historically Democrat or Republican. If you look back to President Bush, before he handed over the White House to President Obama, he allowed in over 60,000 refugees. This is a bipartisan supported program. But for Trump, it represents a potential security threat. And the way he's talked about it is, these are immigrants from areas like the Middle East, Syria, and other places, Sudan, who could potentially be a threat to the United States.
So far, we're talking about executive actions designed to keep people from coming to the U.S. But of course, the order that has probably gotten the most attention so far does something different. It affects those already inside the United States.
Yeah, the birthright citizenship executive action by President Trump was far more sweeping than I expected, than we expected.
How so?
The way it works right now is when you are born in the United States, you automatically get U.S. citizenship.
Birthright citizenship.
Exactly. This is the way we've long understood U.S. citizenship in the United States. We look to the 14th Amendment, which ensures this right, but President Trump is completely changing that. He's making it so if your mother was here in the country unlawfully or was here with a temporary visa and your father did not have U.S. citizenship or a green card, no longer can you be considered a U.S. citizen.
Right. A pretty bold thing to do, given that it's in the Constitution.
Exactly. And President Trump and some Republicans saw this as an incentive for immigrants to enter the country unlawfully and be able to have their children get U.S. citizenship.
Of all Trump's executive orders, this one would seem like it has the steepest legal hill to climb.
This is the one that so far has inspired the most lawsuits of all the executive orders so far.
Lawsuits already.
We've seen several lawsuits. States across the country. On Tuesday, including New York. Cities like San Francisco have filed lawsuits over this executive action, so they're already being inundated with legal challenges. The question is, what happens when this inevitably gets to the Supreme Court? It is kind of hard to get over the fact that it is in the U.S. Constitution and is something that most people have recognized as a fact, as just the way things work in the United States.
I want to put all these orders together and think about the collective impact. On top of Trump's promise to undertake mass deportations in the coming days and weeks, as you're hinting at, it's hard to imagine a stronger message to anyone seeking to come to the United States that it's essentially pointless and futile, and you shouldn't do it. And we're going to make, in your words, the experience very uncomfortable. And what's clear is that poll after poll shows that Americans believe the country has been allowing too many migrants into the country, and Trump now has a mandate to do something about it.
President Trump clearly feels emboldened to take aggressive action and crack down on our immigration system. Oftentimes when you speak to voters across the country,
It comes up almost every time.
Every single time. People see this immigration system as in chaos, and they want some tightening, some control. And what Trump is saying is, this is the time to do that. This is going to be a real test of whether or not deterrence works.
You're saying the question is, if you start to foreclose the legal pathways, are you actually incentivizing, perhaps unintentionally, a return to higher levels of illegal and more dangerous crossings?
It'll be a question of whether or not this communication of mass deportations, of no more birthright citizenship, of closing down asylum and shutting down our borders, whether or not that will inspire people to go back to their home countries, stay in Mexico, or whether they'll be incentivized to cross the country and try to come into the United States undetected and avoid any law enforcement noticing them.
Right. And it will be some time before we have an answer to that. I'm remembering a conversation that I had with one of our colleagues, Julie Davis, during Trump's first term about this same set of questions. And the formulation she came up with is that when it comes to immigration, Biden and Democrats see it as a question of what immigrants bring to the United States and the United States' role as a refuge. Trump and many Republicans in this moment see it very differently, as a question of what immigrants take from the United States and the damage that they are causing to it and to its citizens.
Exactly. It's almost like the story that Americans and America has told itself is that we're a place of refuge. We're a place that takes in people who are fleeing these really dangerous conditions. And Trump is seeking to remake that idea and say, it's time for Americans to think about themselves. And if we don't have a border, like he said repeatedly, we don't have a country. And what we now know is that tens of millions of Americans agree with that idea.
Mohammed, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
As of Tuesday night, attorneys general from 22 states had sued President Trump in federal court in an effort to block his executive order ending birthright citizenship. In the lawsuits, the officials called the order, quote, extraordinary and extreme. Meanwhile,
I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here.
during a church service at the National Cathedral, attended by Trump and his vice president, J.D. Vance, Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy, the leader of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, appealed directly to Trump to show mercy on immigrants.
Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger. For we were all once strangers in this land.
Trump repeatedly grimaced as she spoke and criticized the bishop.
The Daily is supported by Glassdoor, announcing the best places to work in 2025 based on anonymous reviews from real employees. Learn who's leading the way in workplace culture and employee satisfaction, and see who's hiring at glassdoor.com.